1, 2, 3, go.
All right, and we're recording.
We are recording.
Excellent. Okay, welcome to a very special episode of We're Not Helpful, a podcast about books, recommendations, and our thoughts and opinions. I am Eloise, and joining me today is...
It's Brayton.
It's Brayton!
Hello, we're actually, together.
We are, physically in the same room today.
I know, I could reach out and touch you, but I won't, because I respect your bodily autonomy.
Inappropriate workplace touching.
This isn't a workplace.
Oh, yeah, that's true.
No one's getting paid for this.
So we are without Julian today, and that is because...
Slacker.
Yeah, doing actual work in his actual job.
As if.
Today, we are doing the highly anticipated review of Moby Dick.
Yay!
There's
the
no
crowd
yang.
goes wild.
There's no yang. There's only trepidation. All right, so how shall we do this today? Do you want me to start with the... what is it? The essay, the manifesto, that I have written.
No, I want to ask you a couple of questions first.
Okay, great.
So, for a bit of background, if anyone's listening in for this the first time, you wanted to do a 40 before 40 list, and part of that was you wanted to read a classic piece of literature.
Yes.
First of all, why Moby Dick?
Why Moby Dick?
Because you just read Dracula.
I know, I had
which
just read
counts,
Dracula.
and you enjoyed Dracula as far as I remember.
In hindsight, I should have just counted that and ticked it off my list. I don't know why I didn't. I think it was because I had started reading Dracula before I wrote the list, and I felt like it was cheating.
No, that wouldn't have been cheating.
It's such a dumb thing to think. I don't know why I thought it was cheating. Okay, here's what actually inspired me to read Moby Dick. I was listening to a different podcast. I know, it's shocking. I listen to other podcasts apart from our own.
You don't just listen to ours on repeat to drive the numbers up like I do?
Oh, is that how we've been getting all the listens? Okay. Now, so I was listening to a podcast called Strike Force 5. Insert lightning bolt thunder here. If people have listened,
I'll do it in post.
Okay, if people have listened to that podcast, they'll understand that joke. It was by the late night hosts. So you had Jimmy Kimmel, Jimmy Fallon,
yes, they did
John
it
Oliver,
during the writer's strike.
Yes, Seth Meyers and Stephen Colbert. 12 episodes. It is delightful and funny. Episode 5 is the most unhinged piece of podcasting I've ever heard. But in the very first episode, they were talking about what they wanted to kind of do and achieve during the writer's strike, and that's why they came up with the idea of the podcast. And Jimmy Fallon, for some reason, said he thought he would try and read Moby Dick. But before he started reading Moby Dick, he tried to read a book that's called Why Read Moby Dick? He got 2 chapters into that and couldn't finish it.
He needed justification as to why he needed to read that book.
Which was probably should have been an indication as to why I shouldn't have decided to read Moby Dick. But in any case, the idea stuck in my head. And when I wrote my 40 before 40 list, I decided, oh, you know what? Moby Dick. Great. Thanks, Jimmy Fallon. If Jimmy Fallon's listening, I've done it for you, Jimmy. You don't have to do it. So that's why I chose to read it. Yes, it was a mistake.
It sounds like it. If anyone's been following the episodes, it's been a saga. 5 months, I think it took you?
It took about 5 months to read, yes. I'm not the fastest of readers.
Yeah.
But also, I haven't really been reading as much as I used to compared to a few years ago because... when you have kids and you've got a full-time job and you're just tired, there's not a lot of space for reading sometimes. And I was filling my time with other things and I wanted to try and get back into reading. And funnily enough, this podcast has spurred me on to get back into reading again.
Me too. It's really pushed me to read more, even though I don't have as much time as I would love.
Yes. So... It was probably not the best idea to read an almost 600-page classic novel written in the type of English that people don't speak in anymore.
It's definitely got a style to it.
It does. Most of the types of books that were written at the time. Like, you know, as much as Austen and Dickens is beloved, they're very hard to read as well. Like, if you actually sit down and try and read them, they're very... I don't know what it is. It's just kind of difficult to wrap your head around the way the language is set out.
Yeah, it was a different, and I think I read somewhere that how it was written is definitely not how people spoke.
No.
It's a certain style, especially not, I guess, I don't know, maybe the upper classes, but definitely not the lower classes.
No, I don't know if it's like because they're the type of people that were bred on Shakespeare, perhaps.
Yeah, like it's a certain way of holding yourself, or at least showing off your status that, oh, look, I talk in this very posh way, and therefore I'm rich and you're not.
Maybe, like...
I don't know.
Helpful.
No, we're not. I'm not an expert on 18th century literature.
Maybe you should be.
Maybe I should be. 19th century?
19th. Yes.
19th? My mistake?
1800s.
19th century literature. That's even worse. I can't even get the right century. So I guess did you have any expectations of what this was going to be like going in? Like, were you expecting to enjoy it?
I was expecting to enjoy it because so many people love this book and think it's like the pinnacle of American literature. And it's like, you know, it's so popular. So many adaptations have been made of it. I was expecting more drama. I was expecting more whale. You don't get to the whale. Look, I talk about it in my review.
Yeah, we'll get to that. We're not going to spoil anything yet. So more whale, more drama,
less like floating around describing what whales look like and the ship and what being at sea.
So I took up the challenge myself to read this book as well in solidarity, except I did the audiobook.
Yes. If people are going to read this book, definitely do it through Audible because it is far easier to just sit and listen to someone else reading it.
Absolutely. And the performance that I listened to made it interesting. Even the parts, well, I guess the structure of the book needs some talking about because, as I mentioned to you before, I looked up, someone on Reddit said it is 100 pages of story, 500 pages of describing how to whale.
Yes, I would agree with that.
So essentially it's a non-fiction book mixed in with some fiction.
Yeah.
Essentially.
It's a textbook, basically.
Yeah. So the performance I listened to was narrated by Pete Cross. So if you want to listen to the same one that I did, Pete Cross was the narrator of the book I listened to, or the version I listened to. And he did a good job of making it interesting, which I guess is an audiobook narrator's job. If you're bored during an audiobook, then, well, okay, I won't discount that the book itself is just bad. But it's the audiobook narrator's job to make it interesting, and he did. So hats off to Peter. Having said that, I understand that if I was just reading the book through, there would have been some moments I would have struggled as well.
Yeah. Do you want me to read like an excerpt of something? What was that chapter that you found before when we were talking?
I can't remember.
Hang on, I'll just flip to anywhere.
Yep, pick a book.
All right.
Pick a book, pick a page.
I shall ere long paint to you as well as one can without canvas something like the true form of the whale as he actually appears to the eye of the whaleman. When he is his own absolute body, the whale is moored alongside the whale ship so that he can be fairly stepped upon there. It may be worthwhile, therefore, previously to advert to those curious imaginary portraits of him, which even down to the present day confidently challenge the faith of the landsman. It is time to set the world right in this matter by proving such pictures of the whale or wrong.
Riveting.
Goes on about it might be that the primal source of all these pictorial delusions will be found amongst the oldest Hindu, Egyptian, and Grecian sculptures. I don't know.
She just threw the book. She threw the book away in disgust.
Threw it across the room. Oh,
so yeah, so it's oddly structured, at least from a modern standpoint. Where I guess he's giving you my head canon, and I told you about this. My head canon is that these guys are out on whaling boats for literally years. Like, it's not a quick trip. You could be out there 3 to 5 years until you return to port.
Well, they do specifically say, like, the character of Ishmael who is reciting the tale to you in the story, it talks about how he's essentially gone on a 3-year voyage. Yeah. So, yes, it's a very long time at sea. It's not like they spend the entire time 3 years at sea, like they do put in from port to port, but like they go straight back out again, essentially.
Yeah, from my understanding, they essentially are out at sea until the holds are full. Then they go back.
Yeah.
Because I guess in terms of profits, it's not worth taking a half-filled boat back to port.
No, and like one of the most interesting things that happens towards the very end of the book is the point when I can't even remember now. Like they lose half of what they've already collected because of Ahab's like anger in terms of pursuing Moby Dick, and everyone's really angry and cross with the fact that he doesn't care because he's just like, no, doesn't matter, forget about it, let's just keep going and find Moby Dick. That's probably one of the most riveting parts of the book.
The last maybe third of the book, when it really kicks into the hunt for Moby Dick.
I wouldn't even say third. I'd say like the last 5 chapters.
Okay. I forgot. It's a big book. Maybe the last 8th.
Yeah, the last 8th.
The last 8th was really good.
Yeah.
Like, okay. My quick review, because I wanted to just react to Eloise's ranting here. My quick review, I listened to the audiobook. I actually really liked the book. I understand where your frustration is coming from with those chapters, but having listened to the audiobook when it just plays, I don't have to focus so much on the words. It just plays, and it's like someone's reading it to me, which is an audiobook, obviously. Really helped. And I think the story itself is absolutely riveting. I really liked the writing style, actually. And I was really engaged in the story itself. There were the times when those kind of more non-fiction chapters came in. I'm like, okay, let's get through this. And then let's get back to the story. I want to know what happens next. So that's my thoughts. Like, I would rate it a solid, like, 3.5 out of 5 for me.
Okay.
Purely for the story itself.
I think because it did take me so long to really read it, to the point where I was struggling to get through more than 3 or 4 pages a day.
The fact you just persevered and if you weren't doing it for your 40 for 40, you wouldn't have finished the book.
No, I would have just been like, screw this.
Yeah. And no one would have blamed you. You should not read books you're not enjoying.
No.
Life is too short.
But I think the problem was that, there was all of these side stories that didn't really have anything to do. Well, it did, but it wasn't like indicative of the actual story arc itself in terms of going out and finding the whale. Like, obviously there was a lot of stuff that shows you about what life is like on the boat and whaling and all of that sort of thing, and the types of people that you come across, which does paint a picture and it gives you the world. But then he goes off into religious tangents or speaking about I can't even think what else he speaks about because I've blocked it all out. Like very hearty descriptions of whales, which I would argue is probably not necessary.
Yeah.
So it was hard to be like, okay, we've gone on that little tangent and now it's back to the action, because I never felt like, what action? There was no action. There was never any getting back to action because I felt like we never got there in the first place.
Yes.
And like by the time you finally do get there in the end, like I was already just so over it. So yeah, did you want me to start on my actual written review?
Absolutely.
Now?
Let's get on to that. I do want to preface it by the fact that these are our opinions, or at least Eloise's opinions. If you enjoyed the book, if it's one of your favorites, that is fantastic.
Yes, we're not dishing or bagging anyone for liking the book. I mean, I might, but
yeah, I will not.
But yeah, this is just how I feel. So I'm allowed my opinion.
Yeah, and I do understand, like, I've read a little bit about, like, a lot of the stuff about the symbolism and the subtext, and I don't know if you go into that.
Not a lot. I
Yeah.
probably should have done more research about
But
what it
you know,
all
we're
meant
looking
in
at it
there.
from people that are not experts in this field, have just sat down and just read the book, and these are like the initial impressions. If we were doing a university course and
Yeah.
had to look into the symbolisms and the culture of the time and the context and everything like that, you know, maybe we'd have a different opinion.
Maybe, like, obviously, I'm just a layperson. I'm just a regular person, just like anyone else who wants to pick up Moby Dick to read it, and here's my thoughts on it.
Yes. So if anyone out there knows a lot more, please let us know about it, because I'd be interested in knowing more about it.
Yes, and if you haven't listened to our previous episodes, we do have one listener, hello Sylvia, who's emailed us a few times with further context about Moby Dick, and it did help a lot. So thank you for that. If anyone else has any further thoughts or opinions, please do let us know and email us at... I always forget the email address.
nothelpfulpod@gmail.com or you can reach out through Instagram, Facebook.
Can you reach out through TikTok?
No one has. I don't know if you can. To be fair, Instagram and Facebook, I think we check a lot more often than TikTok.
Yep.
Or the email. That's also probably the email's the best way to do it. But if for some reason you don't have an email address but you have Instagram, that's an option.
I don't know how that would be possible.
I'm sure someone worked it out.
Okay.
Anyway.
All right, without further ado, my review of Moby Dick.
Would you mind if I interrupted throughout with comments? Or do you want to rant for the full...
Maybe just let me just rant for the full 2 pages that I've written.
All right, then we'll debrief.
Make notes as you go.
Yeah, we'll debrief at the end.
All right. How does one start a review of Moby Dick? I hear book burning is frowned upon, so perhaps I would be best to just dig a large hole and bury it? But then again, I think we have garnered the type of audience that might just frown upon any type of violence against books, so for the moment I will restrain my physical desires and instead provide you with this scathing oral attack instead. For those of you who have listened along all these weeks and months, it should come as no surprise to any that I detested this book. What started as a fun challenge as part of my 40 before 40 to read a piece of classic literature I've never read before, soon slowly sucked out of me all my love of reading and has frankly exhausted me to read anything else until just the last few weeks. 5 long, laborious months it took to finish this book, and as consequence put in jeopardy one of my other goals, which was to finish all the books in my to-read pile. As such, this item will now need to be changed to start reading the other books in my to-read pile, which I'm thankful to say I have now done. Barely managing a page a day at times, I would instead guiltily delve into the world of Good Omens fanfiction to provide some levity to my days, which frankly a large amount of was written far better than this tome of boredom. But I digress, much like 90% of this book, but we'll get to that later. Why I persisted in torturing myself, I am unsure. To finish what I started? To give the gift to those who have not read it the insight into why they should not? Or was it for some superior gratification and intelligence over the average person? Let's face it, it was probably the latter. Though in the end, did I even really understand any of what was being written? I assure you, I did not. Therefore, the joke is on me, I guess, and I have no cause to lord it over anyone. So instead, let us then move on to the actual content of the book. It starts with the introduction of the book's narrator, beseeching the readers to call him Ishmael. Who his audience is from the perspective of the book, I'm still unsure. Having just finished reading Dracula, I was already used to the context of the story being told through diary entries and newspaper articles. Moby Dick does not provide the same luxury, and I found it difficult to understand who the story was being told to. Was Melville writing from the point of view as Ishmael, like it was Ishmael writing the book, or have I missed something? It seems like it should be diary entries, but then suddenly halfway through, the perspective changes to other characters, though this is infrequent. Though told with descriptive dialogue, I found myself utterly confused at most times, attempting to figure out the action of the scenes. Metaphors were applied liberally throughout the text to a point where I lost the actual plot. It probably doesn't help that a lot of references were made to things contemporary at the time, which are either now lost to history or just lost on the average person who doesn't have some sort of history degree in pre-19th century living. The story starts strongly enough, a young Ishmael wishing to commence a career in whaling, describing his meeting with his now new lifelong friend Queequeg, their seemingly erotic lodgings together, before finding passage and employment on the Pequod, and warnings, I think, against working with Ahab. The book then describes ad nauseum the daily grinds of being on a ship, the whaling industry in general, how everyone negotiates their cut of the takings, and elongated descriptions of every single type of whale there possibly is, and some things that are in fact not whales, but were considered whales back in the 1800s, like the porpoise, although I have since found out that porpoises can be considered whales taxonomically. So I've at least learnt one thing, I guess. Considering how descriptive the chapters became, none of the details held within those chapters have I retained, as I'm pretty sure by this point my brain unfortunately started to melt from boredom. It isn't until chapter 28 that Captain Ahab even bothers to show up, and even then barely speaks 5 words until about chapter 129. As for the titular character himself, it takes a staggering 166 pages for Moby Dick to finally be mentioned, and then spends the rest of the chapter not shutting up about him. Every time you feel like action is about to finally occur or something exciting will happen, Melville, or is it perhaps Ishmael, needs to divert our attention to something inane or trivial. He seems hell-bent on promoting other more interesting books about whaling at the time. I'm guessing because he has come to understand his own has stagnated, as proven by how he starts chapter 45 on page 209, so far as what there may be of a narrative to this book. I am still incredibly dirty at this description. At one point, it is revealed that Ahab has smuggled his own specialty crew aboard to help capture Moby Dick. They assist in the capture of a whale and then never seen again? Seriously, what happened to them? Did I miss something here? There seems to be a point where the story could have become interesting, but I'm pretty sure we're instead gifted with Ishmael's rambling about the importance of having a will. The story continues to meander, though at least gets to the point where they are actually capturing whales. However, due to the flowery and overcomplicated prose, I found myself yet again being unable to really picture exactly what was occurring in the preparation of the whales. I'm still at a loss to explain the chapter containing a scene where they all squeeze whale sperm, and Ishmael is so happy to be close to his male companions. Is this supposed to be homoerotic? Because I read it as homoerotic. This may also be as a consequence of reading an inexhaustive amount of Good Omens fan fiction in between chapters, so perhaps I am reading too much into it. Frankly, it was the most interesting part of the book, and therefore I will give it a pass. We do thankfully get glimpses of Ahab's past, how he came to lose his leg to Moby Dick in the first place, and how he even then sought revenge during his last voyage. How anyone has the right mind to give this man another command, I have no conceivable idea. The action finally takes place in the last 6 remaining chapters, but by this point I was so exhausted I simply didn't care anymore. The crew catch sight of Moby Dick, then sail past a graveyard of ships of sorts, where Moby Dick has already dispelled his fury against man, and spent 3 days and nights attempting his capture. In quick succession, everyone is dead, and Ishmael is left floating alone, where he basically declares, I don't want to talk about this anymore. Fair enough, I guess, when one has just witnessed such horror as a leviathan smashing your ship to smithereens and all your friends lost to the ocean. But he doesn't even at least take the time to lament his very best friend Queequeg. Although I kind of guess he did that a few chapters earlier when Queequeg lay dying of fever and ordered a coffin to be made for him. Ironically, it is this coffin Ishmael clings to in the end before being rescued by another ship. And then it is over. And I'm left feeling the aching hollow of 5 months, having mostly forgotten what the hell happened in this book, and frankly having learnt nothing, except that maybe porpoises can be considered whales. Things of note that I will give to this book. For a book written in the 19th century, it is filled with diverse characters, and although not in particularly flattering circumstances or descriptions, they are at least leading and powerful characters. The book never once uses the N-word, and even the chapters that might be considered racist I see now were likely more biting satirical stances on the white man's hubris of considering himself superior above others. My favourite chapter would have to be when Stubb and Starbuck convinced another ship into taking a far less valuable catch so that the Pequod would be able to pursue the more valuable prized whale, and they laugh about it. Nice. If I were to, however, recommend this book to anyone, I would definitely say read the first chapter and then the last 3. The rest is unnecessary filler. 1 star, and that's being generous.
So clearly we have some disagreements.
All right.
Epic.
Epic.
Epic. All right. Let's see where to start with that.
You're going to tell me how wrong I was.
Oh, absolutely. Okay. Well, the whale was metaphorical. There were no whales.
There were.
Whales don't exist. You missed the whole point. No. One thing I want to touch on, you said it right at the end, and you said it a couple of times throughout, is how I found the book actually quite progressive in many ways.
Yes.
Considering, like, Queequeg, when they first meet Queequeg, it's, I think, at an inn where he's staying the night, and he's already warned that there's someone already in that room, but he doesn't know what it's about. And then he's presented with this tattooed man from, is it Tahiti? No.
I think he's supposed to be Native American.
Is he Native American?
I could be wrong.
I can't remember. This is what Google's for. I'm going to keep talking. And he's like, yes, he's taken aback by this imposing figure of a man tattooed all over. But then there's no kind of hesitation of, like, within a couple of pages, they're best friends.
Yeah. And like I said, it seemed erotic the way that they were together.
Yes.
Sharing the bed, and like they were sharing like the smoke pipe between them.
He's Polynesian.
Polynesian, okay.
I knew he was from some islander.
Yes.
Yeah, Polynesian.
And even the embracing of Queequeg's religion as well, like that was incredibly progressive.
There were mentions
himself a Christian.
Yeah, I think there were mentions of like there might have been still some subtle jabs that Christianity is still true.
Yeah, it's just
and he's wrong, but we're still going to respect his religion, which is quite nice.
It almost is like they were more progressive then than some people are now when it comes to...
I wouldn't put that down for the whole of society at that point.
I think probably Melville just in himself.
But having said that, I think the thing is that being on a whaling ship or being on a ship in general, that kind of stuff isn't important. You are, and you can see it in the book on the, what's the name of the boat?
The Pequod.
Thank you, the Pequod. There are a lot of mix of different races and ethnicities and religions, and it's never a sticking point with anyone.
No, it's just get the job done and don't worry about what other people are doing or thinking or saying.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that's quite a good message to take home. And I wonder whether or not, like, looking at it from today's point of view, there are definitely, I would say, like, oh my gosh, this is so homoerotic.
It wasn't just me then.
In many ways. But I'm looking at that from a modern context. I do not know if back in the day, sharing a bed with a friend was just something you did.
I think it was, like, having bedfellows was a very common thing. It's so funny how in modern times people, like, think certain things about what happens if, men were to be physical with each other.
Yeah.
Compared to back then where it does not seem to have been anything, like, assumed that there was anything homoerotic going on.
Yeah. I am 100% sure that there were gay people on those boats.
Oh, yeah. I mean,
gay people existed.
Of course. Gay people have always existed.
Yes.
And they were at sea, as we've already discussed, for long periods of time.
Oh, yes.
But, like, I tried looking into it, and there does tend to be two minds about it. Either people are just like, no, that really was just a thing of the time, and other people like, no, it's very obvious that this was supposed to be like them being secret lovers or something.
Yes.
So
they were roommates.
They were
they were good friends.
They were best
friends.
They
never married. They lived together. They were just roommates.
They were just friends. Anyway, I love those memes.
That's so good. She never married and lived with her good friend all their life. They're buried in the same plot.
Yep. They were just friends.
They were just good friends.
Just really good friends. Okay. So, yeah, I don't know. It's unless someone specifically knows if it was was what the intention was.
I did look into it a little bit, and whether or not Herman Melville himself might have been, like, he had a wife and he had kids himself. He did spend time on whaling ships. Which is, it's not an indication if you spend time on whaling ships, you're having homosexual thoughts. I'm not saying that.
He just wrote what he knew.
Yes, but it's an unanswerable question, really, because we don't know what was going on in his head. There's always that chance, maybe he was a bisexual. Maybe he was gay, but in that time period, of course,
it was
frowned upon, and you were expected to marry a woman and have children.
Look, Oscar Wilde was married and had children.
Yeah, but he was flaunting it by the end.
Yes.
Yes. There was no doubt about Oscar Wilde.
No.
So it's one of those unanswerable questions as to whether or not Melville intended it to be a homoerotic thing. Is that even the right word, homoerotic, or is there a better word to use?
No, I don't know.
Queer we could use, but in that context, it'd be a different meaning in that time period.
Yeah.
It's unknowable, I think, if Herman Melville actually intended it to mean that, or if we're kind of reading into it at a later date. I think arguments could be made on both sides. But I will ask, it wasn't actually whale sperm.
No, I wasn't sure. That was what I was really confused.
It's spermaceti, which is actually contained in the sperm whale's head.
Ah, okay.
And that is its consistency is like semen.
Okay. Yeah, that's what I was trying to work out.
That's where that's where the sperm whale gets its name from.
Because I was thinking to myself, surely it wasn't the actual sperm.
No.
And I was like, this whole thing where they had to squeeze it was obviously in terms of how to prepare it to make it become like this oil, essentially. Yeah. And I think it was going to be used for like in perfumes and in tinctures and whatever. Yeah,
that's why sperm whales were highly valued, because the spermaceti was so useful and so valuable.
Okay.
But it does have the consistency of sperm.
Yes, but the fact that they were all like squeezing each other's hands and being really joyful about it.
This is why context is important. And they would be joyful because they're getting rich.
I don't know. The way it was described.
Oh, I know.
It seemed like
this is where the arguments come from as to whether or not there was like a double entendre happening, or
I don't think there was a double. I think it was just an entendre.
Yes, but that's the argument, whether or not it was intentional or whether or not they were just excited because they're getting rich from sperm.
Okay, sure. They were just friends.
They were just friends, yes.
All right. Do you want to hear some contemporary reviews that I found?
Absolutely.
Of the time. So this one, I copied and pasted quite a few. I don't know if I'll read them all. This one was from the
You can just summarise.
Yeah. This one's from the London Morning Advertiser, October 24th, 1851. To convey an adequate idea of a book of such various merits as to that which the author of Type and Omu has here placed before the reading public, it is impossible to scope of a review. High philosophy, liberal feeling, abstruse metaphors, popularly phrased, soaring speculation, a style as many-coloured as the theme, yet always good and often admirable, fertile fancy, ingenious construction, playful learning, and an unusual power of enchanting the interest and rising to the verge of the sublime without overpassing that narrow boundary which plunges the ambitious penman into the ridiculous. All these are possessed by Herman Melville and exemplified in these volumes. So, they hated it.
But the trouble with contemporary reviews now is, well, not the trouble, it's just looking at contemporary reviews, there's the baggage that comes from the book already being known as a great work of literature. And I think it would be hard to separate the expectation of the review to the legacy of the book. Like us doing this here, it's not an issue because we're not getting paid for this. We're just doing it for fun. We're not professionals. This is not going to be published in a major article or journal or newspaper or whatever. We're just spouting out opinions. But if you're coming into it from a more professional, quote unquote, or an academic standpoint, you have to take into consideration all the subtext and all the history that has come before it.
Yes. Well, how about this review that was also October 25th, 1851 by Henry F. Chorley from London Athenaeum? I think that's
sure.
Athenaeum. This is an ill-compounded mixture of romance and matter-of-fact. The idea of a connected and collected story has obviously visited and abandoned its writer again and again in the course of composition. The style of his tale is in its places disfigured by mad rather than bad English, and its catastrophe is hastily and weakly and obscurely managed. The result is, at all events, a most provoking book, neither so utterly extravagant as to be entirely comfortable, nor so instructively complete as to take place among documents on the subject of the great fish, his capabilities, his home, and his capture. Our author must be henceforth numbered in the company of the incorrigible who occasionally tantalize us with indications of genius, while they constantly summon us to endure monstrosities, carelessnesses, and other such harassing manifestations of bad taste as daring or disordered ingenuity can devise. We have little more to say in reprobation or in recommendation of this absurd book. Mr. Melville has to thank himself only if his honours and his heroics are flung aside by the general reader, as so much trash belonging to the worst school of bedlam literature, since he seems not so much unable to learn as disdainful of learning the craft of an artist. So, slightly more scathing, that one.
Absolutely. I think it was one of those books that didn't really gain popularity until after Melville's death, if I'm remembering correctly.
Yes. Let's see. I'm just having a look at some other ones.
So that one seemed to agree with you.
Yes. Most of these others are actually like very, very... what's the word? Cut all this
Good,
out.
bad?
More lauding of the book.
Okay.
So, like, they're much more positive
Okay.
reviews. So, yeah. I mean, they're like... I'll read another quick one. A new work by Herman Melville entitled Moby Dick, or... Oh, pardon me. I'll start that again. A new work by Herman Melville entitled Moby Dick or The Whale has just been issued by Harper & Brothers, which is in point of richness and variety of incident, originality of conception, and splendour of description surpasses any of the former productions of this highly successful author. The author has contrasted a romance, a tragedy, and a natural history, not without numerous gratuitous suggestions on psychology, ethics, and theology. Beneath the whole story, the subtle, imaginative reader may perhaps find a pregnant allegory intended to illustrate the mystery of human life. Certain it is that the rapid, pointed hints which are often thrown out with the keenness and velocity of a harpoon penetrate deep into the heart of things, showing that the genius of the author is more analysis of the author for moral analysis is scarcely surpassed by his wizard power of description. That's by George Ripley from Harper's New Monthly Magazine, December 1851. And again, in contrast to a not so positive review, Mr. Melville never writes naturally. His sentiment is forced, his wit is forced, and his enthusiasm is forced. And in his attempts to display to the utmost extent his powers of fine writing, he has succeeded, we think, beyond his most sanguine expectations. The truth is, Mr. Melville has survived his reputation. If he had been contented with writing 1 or 2 books, he might have been famous, but his vanity has destroyed all his chances for immortality. Oh, that aged well.
Oh, yep.
Or even of a good name with his own generation. For in sober truth, Mr. Melville's vanity is immeasurable. He will either be first among the bookmaking tribe, or he will be nowhere. He will centre all his attention upon himself, or he will abandon the field of literature at once. From this morbid self-esteem, coupled with a most unbounded love of notoriety, spring all Mr. Melville's efforts, all his rhetorical contortions, all his declamatory abuse of society, all his inflated sentiment, and all his insinuating licentiousness. I think that's how you pronounce that word. We have no intention of quoting any passage just now from Moby Dick. Good choice.
I'm sorry, that's scathing.
The London Journal.
I refuse to quote anything from this book.
The London journals, we understand, have bestowed upon the work many flattering notices, and we should be loath to combat such high authority. But if there are any of our readers who wish to find examples of bad rhetoric, involved syntax, stilted sentiment, and incoherent English, we will take the liberty of recommending to them this precious volume of Mr. Melville's. That's by the New York United States Magazine and Democratic Review, January 1852. So I think we are justified in saying that the way that this book was written was certainly not how people spoke in the times.
Oh, I think that's very clear.
Yep. So it's not just me.
No one said it was just you.
Okay. I like the fact that there were a lot of balanced reviews there that we were able to find that were both positive and negative.
Absolutely.
So interesting.
Yes.
Did you want to find some reviews from recent reviews perhaps?
I didn't prepare anything.
I thought you did.
I'd looked at it.
Ah.
I didn't know we'd be looking at things right now.
Okay.
But from what I looked at, again, mixed. I think on Goodreads it has a 3.9 out of 5, which is not terrible, but also for a work this popular, I kind of expected more.
Yeah, that's a very average.
Yes. And a lot of the reviews are reiterating what you talked about, that the story itself is quite good, but it's the other chapters that kind of drag it down. And I think a lot of people with the reputation the book had expected something different. And I think that's what you had. I think that was you as well. You had some expectations going in if this was going to be like a high seas, not pirate, but like a high seas adventure.
Yes.
And what you got was an education about how to capture and slaughter a whale.
Yes.
Which, if we're ever stuck on a boat and a whale is nearby, you've got us covered.
No, I don't, because I remember nothing.
You're not going to jump on its back and harpoon it.
I really will not.
No.
And also, don't harpoon whales anymore.
Oh, yeah,
They're
course,
endangered. Let's stop doing that,
Yep.
please.
No, remember what Futurama said?
No.
No, when we stopped hunting whales, their population swelled, as did their taste for human flesh. That's why you can't swim in the real ocean anymore in the year 3000.
I love Futurama.
I did want to talk a little bit about almost the main character, Captain Ahab, who I found very interesting.
Okay.
And especially towards the end, like obviously Captain Ahab is representing like how obsession can drag people under.
Yes.
My question was just like, why did these people not mutiny?
Yeah, I don't know. It really seemed like they were going to at one point. It was very close, but again, I couldn't really figure out what was going on because I didn't understand what was being said. Was it Stubb or Starbuck who was just like, you need to cut the shit?
Starbuck.
Yeah.
I think it was Starbuck.
Or
towards the end when they lost like half
half the cargo that they'd already collected.
Yes.
And he was just like, I don't care, just keep going.
Yes. All Ahab wanted was the whale. It was definitely a personal vendetta.
Yeah.
And
it wasn't even like that he wanted to capture him to use him for anything. It wasn't like this was going to be part of our haul. It was literally, I want to kill that thing and that's it.
Yes, it was a revenge story.
Yeah.
Which the whale was probably just swimming around unaware of anything going on.
And that's the thing. I think it was because I was expecting a revenge story. I was expecting Ahab to be more the main character, to see more of him, to hear more from him. You really don't get nor hide nor hair of him for like 80% of the book.
He hides in the cabin for like the first half of the voyage, I think.
Pretty much. Like, where did I said in my review where he turns up, like in chapter 45, I think it was. So, but
I found him a very frustrating character towards the end because I get the point of him, that his obsession not only pulls himself down but those around him. And, putting that to a day-to-day contemporary review, like you can understand how if you're only focused on one thing, it's at the detriment to yourself and the people around you. They could have cut tail, run home, repaired, and been fine. Yeah. But it's his obsession, and for some reason, his crew's willingness to go along with that obsession that ultimately doomed them all in the end.
And like, I still can't really figure out why. What was it about him that they remained so loyal? Or was it that that's just how people were back then? It's like you remain loyal to your leader, to the mission, regardless if the leader has turned insane. And they speak about it in the chapter where it's finally described how he lost his leg on his previous voyage and how that ship did mutiny and they lashed him to the mast or whatever, and he was still screaming profanity saying, no, we got to get after this whale. And it's at that point that I'm like, who the fuck gave him another commission and why? It's like these idiots back in the States are just like, oh, I'm sure he'll be fine this time.
Look, he definitely comes across as very charismatic.
Does he?
I found his little speeches and his monologues quite intriguing.
Okay, here's what I want to talk about.
Yep.
I think because you have the luxury of having heard it through an audio medium where someone was performing the book to you. Like, did they perform it as characters?
Yes.
Okay, that's what I didn't have.
Yeah.
This was me trying to figure out how these people's voices were. I couldn't figure out how to hear them, if that makes sense. I couldn't hear their characters because I didn't know what was going on half the time because I couldn't figure out the prose.
Yeah.
So I was losing the characterization from them. And I think that's where you're in at the advantage because you listened to essentially a performance.
Yes.
And I think that's where if we watch the films, and I probably should have done it before we did this, like I would really love to watch the Patrick Stewart version.
Yeah.
I know the Gregory Peck version is held up as amazing, but it's like, I'm a Patrick Stewart girl.
You're a Patrick Stewart girl.
I am. So I think if you experience it through Audible or if you watch the movie, you're probably going to enjoy the story more because you will understand the characters' motivations more, whereas I wasn't grasping that.
Yeah. It would be interesting for you to track down, because I think they exist, an abridged version of the audiobook that would cut out a lot of those other chapters and just stick to the story. I'd be interested to see...
It'll be 40 minutes long.
Yeah, but I'd be really interested to see, or I think on Audible actually has like almost like an audio drama version.
Okay, yeah. And like an audio drama would be better because obviously it's going to cut out all of that.
Yeah, and I'd actually be really interested to see if your opinion changed any hearing it or it being delivered that way as opposed to you having to slog through 600 pages.
Yes. And like, as we know, it is based on a true story or true events.
Yeah.
And that was far more horrific than what was actually told in the book. And I think for the fact that I have heard like a podcast about that story, because we listened to Last Podcast on the Left and they did an episode on that quite a while ago.
And that really, the whale attack is just the start of their story.
Yeah.
That's the beginning.
It was more like how they survived at sea after the whale attack.
Yeah.
So, and I don't think anyone sought revenge against the whale, did they?
They probably felt like it.
Oh, it's like, damn, that whale.
Oh, yeah. They definitely would have felt like getting some revenge, but at the time they were starving and had to cannibalize. Not a nice story.
No, it really was not.
Very harrowing, like you said. It was a fascinating story.
Yes. So, yeah, I think it might be a good idea to perhaps find an abridged version, find an audio drama, watch the film, and see how my opinions of it change. Like, I don't disagree that it's, at its core, a good story because it is interesting. But like I said, I was just exhausted.
Yeah, I understand.
It was like, it's like watching the Jodie Whittaker era of Doctor Who, when,
Are we about to go into a Jodie Whittaker era rant?
It's a Chris Chibnall rant, yeah. It's just like, by the time he finally started writing good episodes, and there were few and far between, you just don't care anymore.
I still have not seen The Flux.
Don't! There's no point.
I looked up a summary.
That's all you need. The 3 lines that Russell T Davies wrote in the 60th special for David Tennant that explains what happened with the Flux far explains it more than the 4 years we got before.
It's nice to be excited about Doctor Who again.
It really is. Ncuti Gatwa. Oh my goodness. I want to have your babies, even though I just got rid of my ability to have babies.
Miracles can happen.
They really can't.
Believe in yourself.
Okay. I love him. I just want to squish him.
I will say I maintain Jodie Whittaker was a good doctor.
She was. And she was lovely, by the way. I met her at Supernova a couple of weeks ago for my 40 before 40, which was to do a meet and greet with a celebrity at Supernova. And I was very much prepared to not tick that one off my list if no one coming to the Gold Coast Supernova in April this year was any good. And then I saw Jodie Whittaker on the list. I'm like, that's it, tick, done. And I told her that. And she was like, you don't look 40. All right. I think we've probably come to the end.
Yes, we started talking about Doctor Who. I think this has run its course.
This is a whole different rant that I need to write another manifesto over.
Yes. But I want to know from anyone out there that has more experience in 19th century literature than us, what did we get wrong? Did we miss I'm sure we missed the point.
Oh, I'm sure I missed the point.
I'm sure we missed the whole point of the book. But as we said at the top, we are coming from this as lay people just reading the book and taking it like at face value without needing the university degree behind us to kind of really get into the meat of what the symbolisms and everything were. Because I'm sure it's there, and I know we didn't really go into it much.
Yes, I didn't really touch on the symbolism because I didn't feel smart enough to.
Yeah. At that point, you just wanted to get it over with.
I really did.
Yeah.
Any final thoughts?
Ah, my goodness. Sperm's very valuable. That was the point of the whole book, I think.
I think so.
If you have sperm, you are rich.
You are. All right. I think it's time for a Macca's run, don't you think?
Macca's run. Can we stop at the bottle first?
Sure.
Excellent.
All right, thanks everyone for listening. Don't forget to like and subscribe on all the socials, and we will see you for another regular episode very soon.
Yes, bye-bye.
Bye-bye.